This is lower, this is upper. This is the oppressed, this is the oppressed. This is the exploited, this is the exploiter.
Hierarchy as it exists in the family. Hierarchy as it exists in the school.
Is it right that so many people live in such poverty in a society surrounded by such riches? No, it obviously is not.
Because of the way this society is organized, because of the violence that exists on the surface everywhere, you have to expect that there are going to be such explosions. You have to expect things like that as reactions.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Red in the Face. Today we're joined by myself, Jarrad and Dan. Jarrad has just been to a very hot pizza by the looks of it. Oh, and by the way, he's wearing a Morrissey shirt, so we need to give him some shit for that later.
That's me cancelled. I might as well just leave now.
He was well upset. As you can tell by the kind of casual intro, today we're doing an episode of Last Orders. We were going to do an episode on mental health and capitalism, but James bottled it, so thanks, James. So instead,
And also,
we're just going to...
we were going to have an episode last week, but our guest had something massive happen, so that's why we've had a bit of a delay in the episode.
I forgot we've had a delay. Sorry about that, guys. I know you look out for this every week. So yeah, we're just going to do Last Orders, have a drink, have a pizza, and have a chat about the goings on in the world the last couple of weeks. I think we'll start with a serious one because by the end it will all be, shits and giggles. So we'll start with talking about Israel-Palestine. Obviously, well, I was going to go into the specifics of it, and I will, but really, it makes more sense to talk about it in the wider context. But yeah, basically, the reason that it kicked off again recently, it was about a month ago. Not about a month ago, it's longer than that. Basically, there's been some forced evictions in a place called, is it Sheikh Jarrah, the name of the place in Palestine? Yeah, where settlers have basically been going in and just taking homes. So basically, it all kicked off because there's been kind of over the last like many years, but more recently, there's been an increase in evictions or threats of evictions to Palestinian families in Sheikh Jarrah, which I think is sort of. Is it in Jerusalem? Is it in East Jerusalem? Is it like a town in... I'm not sure. Basically, it's predominantly Palestinian area, but is slowly being, encroached upon by Israeli settlers, backed by the Israeli Defense Force. And on I think it was the 7th of May, at Al-Aqsa Mosque, there was a gathering for is it Iftar as the end of Ramadan? There was a gathering there, obviously a lot of Palestinians gathering there, basically just to celebrate the end of Ramadan, but I think Israel would say they saw it as a gathering of opposition forces, basically. There was people waving Palestinian flags. How dare people wave the flag of their own nation at their mosque? But yeah, basically what happened is the Israeli Defense Force went in, all of that kind of thing. And then since then, it's all been about the reaction to that. There was global protests. There was a lot of protests every day, basically, in Palestine against what had happened there, but also more widely, what had happened in Sheikh Jarrah, what's happening in Sheikh Jarrah, and even more widely, what's happening in the region generally. So yeah, and there's been... This is what's been interesting about it is the fact that this is probably the biggest reaction from the global community, isn't it? Since I can remember, at least. This is the most that people have actually been bothered about it.
It feels like it's a bit of a... I feel like, without slagging anybody off, I don't mean to. I feel like with Black Lives Matter stuff, in terms of like, at least an online presence, it's sort of changed. I think it's changed the game in terms of that now you have to be outwardly, you need to be seen to be on top of these big societal
to be
issues,
conscious,
even as non-political people. So I feel like that's the one element to it. But I do agree that there seems to be a certain level of cut through where there wasn't potentially before. But I don't know if that's just that's part of a. This isn't anything any worse than what's been happening to Palestinians for the last decades. It's just that maybe we're part of this age now where there was a week where everyone was sharing Pray for Colombia stuff around the suppression of violence. I don't know if it's hopefully it is cutting through rather than it's just a part of a wider trend of this is the new thing.
I won't be too surprised because obviously with the Black Lives Matter movement, I think that did encourage a lot of people to read into sort of issues surrounding sort of like Black lives essentially, and inextricably linked to the struggle in Palestine is like Black nationalism and civil rights. So I wouldn't be surprised if there is just been a correlation with the rise of Black Lives Matter movement that more people have become aware of the plight to the Palestinians, and it's only something that can be welcomed. The only thing that I find peculiar with just briefly going into the politics domestically about Palestine is like a lot of Trotsky's parties support a two-state solution, which I find absolutely baffling. Like
they just have odd takes on it.
But it's just sort of like, there's no, there's an Israeli working class, and it's just sort of like, well, yeah, but I don't really understand how you can.
I did see that the one AWL guy. For people that don't know, AWL being a sort of Trotsky party, but they've got some very odd. They got an odd checkered past, but yeah, one guy tweeting being like, "Well, at the end of the day, there is an Israeli working class," but it's like, well, yeah, but they're benefiting from the apartheid system. There were also relatively white working class people in South Africa. They're still benefiting from apartheid. Like they're still benefiting from the fact that there's this underclass of people who, it's just a mad point. In all this, it's not the point to make.
No.
Like, yes, there is a working class still in Israel, and there was a working class in white South Africa, but that doesn't mean that you then have to bridge the two gaps between. That there's still an oppressor and an oppressed. Like, it's just a mad, weird point to make at an odd time.
I've never heard that before, but it makes complete sense. You saying it like that. I do not. That doesn't surprise me that much at all. It's all about being contrarian for them, isn't it? I think.
I think it's taken an overly nuanced point. It's basically.
Like Jarrad, I've actually read on the topic, and you're just coming in. You're sharing your Instagram stories, and I actually know what I'm on about.
I'll have you know, I've actually made this speech to a crowd of 8 in a pub in Solihull at one time, and it went down a treat with everyone who's read the same article as me.
That has come from Jarrad there, from pure personal experience and anger there.
Yeah, it's left Zionism is not a thing as much as some people try and claim it. I mean, there's a left in Israel, isn't there, that call themselves the left? But I don't know if this could be wrong, but I think even the Communist Party, I mean, obviously because they're in Israel, might be. I'm pretty sure they're a Zionist party as well. I could be wrong about that. But.
Well, the guy who he was the leader of the Labour Party in Israel, like he's the Israel Labour Party, who was basically has a quote going around of like mixing Jewish people with non-Jewish people in a relationship is like lessening the blood of Jewish people, and that's the sister party or the connected party to the Labour Party.
That's just like textbook fascism. Like you can't get any more clear than that.
I just thought, by the way, we didn't do an episode this time, but we did a Free Palestine episode in our first series for people that want to go back and have that sort of like bit more of a plotted history and what the fuck people are on about when they talk about Zionism and things like that, which was really, really insightful at the time.
Yeah. So another thing that's kind of been adding to the tension that's going on in the minute in the region is like the election that's going on. I don't know if it's to do with like Netanyahu's. Like, was there even an election, or did his government? Like, there was an election a while ago, and has his government now collapsed, like a while after, or something like that? And so the opposition have been asked to form a government on the basis of that collapse. And there's this centrist guy. He's like in the equivalent of a Liberal Party. He's formed a government for the first time with the Arab Party in Israel, like the main Arab Party, which is like bizarre because he's a former settler as well, like he's former settler like leader a leader in the settler community, and all the hard right in Israel are like kicking off because he's not like Zionistic enough for them, even though he's a former settler.
I think from what I saw was there was like a right wing. There was enough seats in like the sort of ultra right of like maybe even some of Netanyahu's party to form a government to oust Netanyahu. So Netanyahu essentially just went to some sort of centre right, and then to every other party on the left to avoid this like really, really right wing. Like if you think Netanyahu's right wing, I think these were like ultra, like next level. So I think
their political spectrum operates on like a completely different universe. Like.
So I think that's what happened. So it forced Netanyahu to, and I suppose it forced those sort of left parties to maybe join in this coalition to prevent that happening. That's what I think. That's from what I've seen anyway.
Yeah. Touching on the sort of the idea of hello Anna. Thank you very much. Anna's just brought me my dinner. Sorry. Touching on the what was I going to touch on? What was I touching?
I don't know, the political parties.
You've thrown me off, Anna. No, touching on
bring me my fucking dinner. Ruin my podcast.
Well, to clarify, I cleaned the flat head to toe yesterday for when she got home and made her dinner. So
right, yeah.
I'm a good house husband. I was going to say, touching on the kind of the activism of the global community since what happened at Alexa, and whether that's like genuine or not. And you were saying that it is kind of in this environment of, Black Lives Matter and things like that, and the idea that if you're not out on social media sharing these articles, sharing these petitions, then you're not like involved in, you're not quite like, it is a bit like that. Like to be like involved and be part of things, you have to like take part in things like that. But hopefully, and I agree that there's definitely an element of that, but hopefully that kind of, if it starts out as being disingenuous, hopefully it becomes genuine after a while because of being caught up in these movements.
I think I probably agree with Jarrad's point that hopefully the optimist in me says that Black Lives Matter seems to have changed the game, because it seems the side point of whilst Black Lives, like obviously there's that obvious connection between Black Lives Matter and the Palestinian struggle. The Black Lives Matter to maybe particularly non-political people has realised that there's been an awakening for people that they need to educate themselves on issues, and that this idea of like ignorance is bliss is no longer acceptable in modern society. Like you've got to learn what's happening to people that either live with you, like live in the same community with the same street as you, or even if they live afar, that there's these power structures. And so I'm hoping that's the positive from it, that all these people, like I saw a kid from school who he shared, a kid from school, like the naughty kid in my school basically, he shared a Free Palestine post, and I was like, is this the cut through? I was like, what? Like this fucking kid was throwing chairs at people, and he's sharing Free Palestine.
I've noticed that a lot of people who I would never expect to be political and be on the left or in support of issues such as Palestine, and they're sharing all the
That's why it's massive that like Paul Pogba though, and the lads at the FA Cup final, are waving the flag. It's that entry level stuff for people to be like, well, why have they decided to do this thing to make this up?
And I'm pretty sure, based on like polling, I think Britain's one of the most sympathetic countries in Europe, based on the polling of like the country towards Palestinians.
It wouldn't surprise me that much, because we get a lot of information through about it, and I suppose everyone does now. But I just feel like it's because it's so cut and dry. Like this is one of the things that's pissed me off actually in like recent weeks, like some of the coverage talking about how it's a complicated issue. It is not a complicated issue at all.
I was going to say,
it's complicated if you accept the Israeli narrative, then it becomes complicated. But the Israeli narrative is, plagued with falsehoods and also, cruel in the way it's being played out.
In terms of accepting the Israeli narrative, I think the way like the BBC act on this issue, I mean, there's obviously the absolutely brilliant Tony Benn clip where he's just like, no, you're not going to stop me. And he just starts reading out the number for a Palestinian charity, doesn't he? Like, we're going to be meeting at this place now. And it's brilliant. But that sentiment has been there throughout, that you watched like clips from Newsnight, the way that the parameters they set on the debate is it Emily? What's her second name? Like
Mateless.
Mateless. Yeah, she was like the way she was like putting a boundary on the debate of like a conflict, asking that one guy being like, well, do you condemn Hamas? He was like, well, I'm not a member of Hamas. I've never have been. Why are you asking me? Like, that doesn't matter. Like, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter. And especially when you saw the death toll, like the death toll at one point was like 8 Israelis and hundreds of Palestinians. It's like, it doesn't, why am I getting the same amount of fire and pressure from you as an interviewer as the person, the ambassador for Israel to the UK is?
That's what cuts through as well. Like when you'll see these, and some of the news articles have just been infuriating. The articles and like just bits on News at 10 and stuff like that have just been infuriating. But I think that's what cuts through is they do all this and they're talking about, they're focusing on Hamas and talking about Hamas as if they were the ones who begun this conflict. And then at the end they have to read out the figures, or at some point in the news section they have to read out the figures, and it's like, well, hold on, if you're someone who didn't know anything about it, you'd be listening going, oh god, that Hamas, those Palestinians sound pretty frightening, don't they? And then you'd hear the figures at the end of it and you'd be like, oh well, one, they're not very successful, and two, Israel sounds like a brutal regime because they're killing hundreds of people.
I mean, all you need to do is show people that graphic of like how much land Palestine has lost to Israel over like 60 years or 70 years, and like just say like, would you stand for that? No one is going to turn around and say, well, I probably would, yeah, I probably just let it slide. Like you're defending the indefensible at the end of the day when you look at that infographic.
I think Morgan said on the podcast we did in the first, like our sort of first series when we did a Free Palestine one, but it's got to the point now where it's almost not about land anymore, because they've lost so much land. It's so, what was Palestine and Palestinian land is so unrecognizable now that they're actually just fighting for their presence as a people. It's got to that level. It's got to that point now. It's not even, it's almost like they know they're not getting the land back that they once had. Never mind just trying to defend the bits that they still operate to an extent. They're just trying to defend themselves as a people, and ultimately, I'm not someone that's well versed in Hamas. I know there's a million and one things that probably you'd say it's reprehensible or whatever, but if you back people into that kind of corner, many of them choose violence. Again, looking to South Africa, you've got Nelson Mandela started the military wing of the ANC, and basically throughout his book is really interesting that people talk about, like everyone, the international community always talks about sanctions. Like South Africa got stopped because of sanctions. He spends 2 pages talking about sanctions and about 4 chapters talking about terrorism. Like, international sanctions did basically fuck all. Like, it helped. Like, he didn't want them to stop, but he dedicates so little time to it in his recounting of the struggle, because he just talks about how effective terrorism was to bringing people to the negotiating table. But so this like idea that it's just never in the concept that there's never that nuance of, that there's a reason why groups and people and whatever have to turn to violent means, because like they are literally now scrapping for their survival as a people. And as you were saying, like the stuff about the land, I mean, that Momentum video where there's a settler who's like in a Palestinian woman's garden, and he's just like, well, if I didn't take it, somebody else would. And it's like, what? Like, she's literally taken her house off her. It's just stood in her garden. She's like, no, this is my house. And he's like, well, if I didn't, someone else would. And she's like, no, that's not how it works.
Annie's from like Brooklyn, New York as well. Like, the most infuriating that clip. If you ever want to feel angry, watch that clip. It's disgraceful. What you were saying about the fight being about for the survival of the Palestinian people now, I think that's like completely true, because and it's shown in the compromises that the Palestinian people have made. I think the complete just solution for them would be to reclaim all of their land and have it all be Palestine. But instead, they are willing to accept roughly 40%, less than that, I think, like 35% of their land on the June 67 borders. And still, that's not enough for Israel. Have either of you seen the clip of he's the Palestinian ambassador to the UK? He's been doing the rounds on a few different channels or newspapers recently, I think, but he did one on Channel 4 with Krish, talking about it, and he was just asking, the interviewer was just asking him like about Hamas the entire time, and he just brought the conflict down to like its basics, like what they're actually calling for. And he said like we are compromising, like we have a bare minimum that we want, but we are hugely compromising, and that is because if they don't, they are going to cease to exist as a people. Like, I'm not saying that they're all going to die, but at the very least, they're all going to be forced into Jordan at some point, and there won't be a Palestine, and therefore won't be a Palestinian people. Yeah, it's disgraceful. It's really depressing situation.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting when journalists ask those questions. I think you touched on it, Dan. It's like, well, look at the size. Just look at the fucking size of Palestine, and look at the backing that Israel has. Like, what? Like, how is it fair that you're asking the same questions that? Well, they probably wouldn't even ask that of Israel. They don't ask that of Israel because they consider Israel to be like the only democracy in the Middle East. Let's forget, perhaps the racism behind that, because
most of them can't vote.
It's the only white nation, and the fact that most of the people in Israel can't vote, and it's just an outright lie that it is the only democracy in the Middle East as well. But yeah, I think the media approach to it is baffling. I think like what you said, Morgan, about at some point they have to show the figures and they have to show the footage, and then it just doesn't marry up with the whole interview or the whole segment.
And like aren't Israel like the fifth? Is it the fifth biggest army? I'm probably
yeah,
it's definitely top 10. Like
fourth or fifth, something like that.
It's and the amount of funds that are channeled into it by America is just it's crazy. It's a crazy.
And there's more on the way, according to Biden, I think.
Biden signed an agreement, didn't he, for more funds to go?
Yeah.
Whilst being like, but please don't, a couple of shout outs to be fair. I mean, shout out to the people in the UK that were not obviously protested, but were protesting at that arms factory where they were going out to Israel, but also a shout out to the FBU.
Yeah, 100%.
The fire brigades turned up. They checked it was safe. They were like, yeah, they're sound up there. The police basically told them to assist them in taking them down from the roof. And the FBU rep came in and said, absolutely fucking not. And they just went home. They're like, they're safe. We're not police. We don't police anything. Our main thing is safety. They said they're safe and they're doing a just thing. Class. So we're going to go fucking solidarity to them.
I love shit like that. Gives me goosebumps. I love it.
Yeah.
Working class solidarity. Can't beat it.
And that
I haven't seen that, but I need to look at that because that's my favorite thing. It's like that from that clip a few weeks ago of the
in Glasgow,
the two guys that were going to get deported, and they all the Glaswegian neighbours just came out and were just saying like, these guys are our neighbours, like we like these guys, and they all just sat in front of the police car.
Get to fuck basically.
Yeah. Obviously, that had a practical element to it as well, because practically it was trying to stop the arms going to Israel, but just acts of solidarity like that. People on the left sort of getting involved with it and don't think, well, what's it going to change? What that means to the people that you're sort of supporting or defending in that struggle is massive. Like if you talk to miners, like sort of so interviews with miners from 1984 and the international solidarity, to do full circle, as you can tell, I've just read a book about it, that the miners in South Africa sent money to miners in the UK in 1984 when they were, so like mainly black miners in South Africa sent money to striking miners in the UK. It means like so much when you're in that struggle. So even doing your little bit by going to a protest, if that's sort of all you can do, if not pledge sort of things to different organisations, it just goes so far in that struggle.
And 100%. And the international community is incredibly important, especially for the Israel-Palestine conflict. I shouldn't be calling it that anymore, but
we're the ones supporting Israel as well, though. It's the same when we had the Cuba episode, and it's like Britain are, even though in the UN they don't vote for it, British companies, the British government, influenced by America, are influencing what is happening to this nation, and we back Israel to the So
it's completely
us putting
instrumental.
pressure on our own government will have a knock-on effect of
and I think
100%.
one of the biggest campaigns at the moment is like the divestment from funds from divestment from Israeli related companies in pension funds. Like there's a massive campaign at the moment like, for the West Midland pension funds to divest away from Israeli products, from Israeli brands, from Israeli banks, businesses, because some of these like funds have so much money and they're essentially funding this, call it what it is, this apartheid regime, but to the tunes of millions and millions of pounds. And it's a massive way. So if you are involved in a local trade union, raise the question, what are we doing as part of to divest if we are aware of our pension fund in the region, the council is investing in, Israeli banks, Israeli products and businesses. It's a massive thing.
Yeah, 100%. It is huge. And I mean, there was that interview that I was talking about with the ambassador. Krish kind of said to him at the end of the interview, when he kind of successfully dealt with all his questions and all his like lines, he asked him, well, what do we do about it? What's the solution? What can we do to help, especially in Britain, specifically? And he said, all you have to do is carry out international law. So you already have laws in place to stop what is happening in Israel, Palestine. There are laws in place there to deal with war crimes. He says, I think the group is called the ICC. They're like some kind of like human rights commission. And what they can do is go in there and assess the situation and then recommend, I think what they would do is recommend sanctions based on what they found to be happening there. And of course, what they would find was, huge amounts of war crimes on Israel's part and perhaps on Hamas's part as well. And he said that. He said in the interview, I'm happy for if Hamas has committed atrocities, which just purely because they haven't got the capabilities to, they haven't much. But if they have, I'm happy for that to be dealt with as long as Israel is being dealt with at the same time. But Britain and the people behind this commission, I guess in the first place, the nations behind this commission, aren't willing to let it happen. So they've built this international law that's meant to deal with exactly these situations, and they won't let it. They won't let it be carried out.
Haven't the UN?
That's all they're asking for.
The UN declared the occupation illegal for like fucking 30 years or whatever. And like, well,
yeah.
At that point, there's people that study politics degrees. Am I right? A bunch of pricks. But the people that study like international relations and then just like actually study what the UN does. Well, stop. If you're 17 and you think about going to uni and you're studying international relations, stop what you're doing, because you're going to learn about the UN and you're going to get some sort of bollocks that they do something. They do sweet fuck all. They say every year, oh, these bad things shouldn't happen, and nothing happens about it because all these organizations, there's a power dynamic within them, and the power dynamic is shifted massively towards the US. I mean, that is why, I'm sure we'll do an episode one day, like China is almost, if not influencing international institutions, creating its own network, because these institutions like the UN are just massively skewed towards the US, and they just end up mimicking it. And that is why the UN just don't do anything. It's just like fucking, write a strongly worded letter that Israelis should stop. It's just a load of shit.
And then wear their lapdog at the same time. It's always interesting, isn't it, seeing those maps of like different UN resolutions and who signed them and who vetoed them. And it'd be like, I don't know, green for whoever signed it, and it's like the whole map is green, and then vetoed is like the US. Then a couple of the like random ones here and there.
Isn't Cuba like 99% of countries sign it, and then it's just the US say no, we what do you call it? Where you
abstain.
We abstain. US vote no. Everyone else votes. Literally, the whole world votes yes. Apart from maybe like Israel and the US, and then Cuba sanctions keep on going.
Because the rest of the world doesn't, stand to make any money off of it, off the situation. It's not just about money. It's also, I mean, the Zionism of evangelicals in America is a big factor because they're a big voting bloc, and their Zionism comes from the idea that Jews are meant to return to their homeland in Israel before the rapture can happen, and they like seriously believe that. There's like a serious chunk of people in America who stand by that and they support Israel because of that. And a lot of them go over to Israel and volunteer, basically do free labor for Israeli businesses just to support the cause. It's fucking mental.
But even bigger than that is fundamentally, like we said before, is that Israel is USA's foothold in the region. Like we spoke about when we spoke about the Colombia episode, like they pump so much money into the Colombian government because they see it as a way of, being their foothold in Latin America.
Being near the oil.
Well, originally it was obviously to try and stop a sort of a red spread in the Middle East and in Africa. That's why they had to have some sort of like base in Israel. But it's the same. Israel and Colombia, they play the same. They probably don't give a shit what actually happens in those countries as long as the people that they want in charge are in charge. So America can continue to have a presence in that wider region, and that's what it's always been about.
Mm. It is just like a little military offshoot of the US, isn't it? In a key region.
With that fucking dome shit. What is that? What is the dome?
Iron Dome. It's the defense system.
Just shoots down rockets.
It's like
basically means that rockets are fucking pointless going into Israel.
Yeah, it's just like for every like couple hundred Hamas fires, one will get through or something like that. That's something ridiculous. Like, yeah, it's incredibly effective. But I think they're talking about making it even more effective as well, and I think that's where some of Biden's money is going. I could be wrong about that, but I feel like I heard that somewhere. Bloody mess. So, what should we talk about? Because I think we've covered that pretty sufficiently.
There we are. That's that sorted.
Yeah.
The world's rights.
There you are, guys. Sort it out now. Come on.
Yeah, you've messed around long enough now.
Come on, get around the table. Just get around the table and stick this on. Stick this last orders on.
We get called to evidence at UN. Boys, come on. Hey.
Points in hand.
You've annoyed Mum now. Stop. All right.
My mum has blown up her WhatsApp group with all this. Should we talk about? This is something that I only heard about today. What it seems so far, like the success of the socialist candidate in Peru, although it's on an is it still? It's not. Is it done and dusted, or are they calling for recounts and stuff? Because it's so close?
I think the opposition, the right wing candidate, is calling for a recount of 100,000 votes. I think the margin of victory is like 89,000.
Bloody hell! You never want to, as a socialist, you never want to win an election by a thin margin.
It's got to be a landslide.
It's got to be a landslide.
Before we talk about anything, the fact that Castillo, is it Castillo or Castillo?
Yeah.
Wears a shit hot cowboy hat. I'm a big fan of throughout.
You guys are gonna have to lead this one because, like I say, I only heard about this today. So,
well, I think he rose to like prominence because he led like a teacher strike in 2017, and then from that he built up his campaign. He's obviously part of he's a socialist. So he was a union leader when he led the strike. And he ran for president, and I think he wasn't really expected to do that well, but he surged in the polls. And then I think they have a system where if one party doesn't reach say 50%, it then goes into like a alternative voting system. So all the votes then go down to preference. And I think the final runoff was between them two because they couldn't get like a majority that way. So I think they had a final runoff, I believe. And obviously he's come out on top. I mean,
people remember as well that Katerina, who we've had on twice for Venezuela and the Bolivia pod, basically said if Cuba goes left, if Peru goes left. Yeah, sorry, if Peru goes left.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
That is the starting gun for South America because
they'll be absolutely bricking it.
That is the nut to crack, basically.
Yeah, because it's one of the wealthier nations. I think. It's one of the ones
with mineral wealth as well, isn't it? I think they all are.
It's traditionally had stronger links to the US, isn't it? I think Colombia, is the main, buddy of the US, but I think Peru
and then
isn't far behind.
Lula in Brazil at the minute is absolutely racing in the polls.
It is a red wave, isn't it? I haven't really been, or a pink tide. I haven't really been following it enough, but it is incredibly exciting because a serious amount of very important countries in the region now, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Lula's absolutely battering Bolsonaro in every single poll that comes out by like a 15% margin. I think is the smallest I've seen.
So
I hope he tries to arrest him or something.
I say it'd be good to do a Brazil podcast, and like for listeners that don't know the history, that basically Lula was president of Brazil, put forward, I think mainly sort of more like social democratic.
Yeah, it's a social democracy basically.
Yeah, social democratic program, but then there has been a culture in Brazil of sort of corruption, a bit like you get in China, where it's this it's like in the political psyche of like corruption and dealing with corruption as a big political capital. And the right, despite being the ones that were actually politically corrupt, use that. And what was it linked to? It's like linked to like a fucking petrol thing or something odd that they got Lula on. And he went to prison, and then his sort of deputy came in charge, and then Bolsonaro, the far right sort of leader, the guy who said that in the Brazilian civil war they didn't kill enough people, like that.
Yeah,
that job.
They got rid of Dilma, didn't they? Dilma Rousseff.
He got in, and then Lula came out of prison and is now back to. There's a document. I'm pretty sure there's a documentary out there.
A documentary on Netflix, I think.
Yeah, where he does that speech. I've seen that speech he does before he goes. He hands himself in, and it's like, oof.
Well, isn't there some of it? I don't know. You cannot stop the spring or something, isn't it?
Yeah, it's I mean, in terms of like a man knowing that he's going to prison, I'd just be like, I'll have a steak and I'll go.
Yeah, but I mean, just briefly back to Pedro Castillo. Yeah, like it's pretty batchy. Like you could never run on a platform similar to that here. I mean, there was like, words such as like anti-imperialism, like dialectical materialism was mentioned, like in the manifesto that went to the public, like, looking to our leaders in Marx and Lenin, praising like, Fidel Castro and Hugo Chavez, Evo Morales.
Like, you should charge money for this sort of talk. Right,
I was reading it in bed last night. I was like, whoa, open a window, like Jesus.
Stop. I can only get so erect.
I think I only just got to foreign policy and I had to pack it in for the night. So I was like,
and I'll see you in the morning.
Oh my god!
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, unbelievable.
What's the thing? I mean, again, as a complete layman to it, there's been a slight criticism that it's very economic heavy and strong, but on social issues, there's almost been like an ignoring of it. It's like
there was, I did try and have a look in the manifesto. There was no mention of sort of like abortion or LGBTQ plus rights, but there was no mention of any social issues at all, really. It was very what you may say sort of classical sort of left Marxism, sort of pure economics, class,
but a little bit driving into the populist skid that you've got to. I don't know. It depends on the makeup of the country. You've got to pick your battles.
I mean, I mean, with Peru, it's a very Orthodox Catholic country as well. I'm not saying that as Marxists or as socialists, you shouldn't, be dissuaded to be vocal in these things just because the country is like, religious. But I think you have to.
You get the problem
on stuff like that.
You get the problem like you get in Cuba, though. That if that's not baked into your political program from the beginning, you get what you had in Cuba, where they were very slow on LGBTQ plus rights, and you get this sort of decades of tradition where it basically for LGBT people life was very similar. Like, do you know what I mean? There's got to be a sense of, if it's not baked in at the start, how much will you concede when you get in? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it's got to be one of them.
There was a massive aspect, just briefly. There was a massive aspect on women, sort of bringing women in. I assume they're already in the workplace, but making sure there's equal pay within the workplace. Providing like resources so that there's childcare arrangements and stuff like this, investing in education. Getting them into university. There was a lot of this stuff, but then that was sort of the only social issues that was discussed within the manifesto.
I think when it comes to like issues like that, it's one of them where the grassroots, especially the younger generation who understand those kind of things, who aren't so socially conservative, they've got to pressure their guy, their candidate and their party to to progress when it comes to things like that. But at the end of the day, I've got to support it anyway. Because what's your other option? Someone who's not only not talking about sexism, racism, things like that. Not only not talking about it, but is actively working against women's rights and you know.
And that's the thing. Like, I know it's tricky because it's easy to say when you're not a member of the LGBTQ plus community to sit here and say, oh, you know, you can't be puritanical about it. You can't be a Puritan. You just got to, you know, like you said, it's part of the struggle. Even on the left, it's part of the struggle. You know, it's no different if it was a conservative government. You've still got to, you know, build up that social movement, and perhaps, hopefully, you know, it should be more well received by a left-wing government than a right, but that's not always the case, as we know through history. So, you know, but yeah, what is the alternative?
I could 100% understand people from minority communities not being able to get on board with stuff like that. But I think ultimately, yeah, like it's your choice of two parties who are both socially conservative, or two programs that are both socially conservative, but one isn't.
Yeah,
so fiscally liberal.
The other candidate is literally the daughter of the previous person who was like part of a right-wing dictatorship. Am I getting that right? So you know, it's amazing in Latin America, and you don't seem to get it as much maybe in Europe. Like, you know, you do get it at times in history, but in Latin America at the moment, it is literally socialism or barbarism. Like, every time there's two candidates, it's like the fucking worst of the worst, someone that's all right or someone that's brilliant, and that's it. like that is, and it's, I mean,
so true.
And that's why
it's very polarized place.
What the fucking, historically, always have a look what the fucking liberals in the middle do, because you can bet your bottom dollar it will not be back in the left.
The interesting thing about Peru, which I think I'm about to completely undo your argument there, Dan, is that he managed to pull in, because these other parties didn't make the runoff. Didn't make the runoff.
Liberal Jarrad.
Because they didn't make the runoff, he actually pulled in a former World Bank economist whose whole thing is being fiscally prudent in order to calm them down and to get that vote, which is, you know, it might just be
he's just playing the game.
It might just be electioneering, but like, because he's never been in government and his party's never been in government and no one within his close ranks have worked in government,
you've got to give it that air of legitimacy.
Yeah, he said their arguments or the political strategies was like, well, we need these people because they have been in government, they know how government works, how it runs, and yeah, like you said, it needs that air of legitimacy and experience for people to go, you know what, I can place my trust in them. So there's an interesting sort of, like, his main political advisor is like a Marxist-Leninist. I think maybe a lecturer, and like his main economic advisor is like a former World Bank economist whose main thing is about like fiscal.
That's kind of what happened with Corbyn as well. And that was that, and like when obviously John McDonnell was seen, especially back then, was seen as this like crazy radical, and he'd appointed like the most left-leaning MP in Parliament to be his shadow chancellor, and then. That was the idea, wasn't it? That I remember people like Paul Mason and stuff saying at the time, like, you have to get people in who know how to govern. Like, what does that even mean?
Because Morgan, you're not understanding Marxism from a social democrat, as Paul Mason famously said.
And the thing is, like, the reason why Corbyn came into power was because these people don't know how to govern. That is the exact reason that Corbyn was there.
I think that's like shorthand for, like, knowing how to govern is shorthand for won't change anything.
Well, it's like we've said before. It's this idea of electability. It's that sort of technocratic government idea of just, you know, we need a steady hand on the tiller, because a steady hand on the tiller isn't a threat to the fundamental, like, the people that run society. So that's what they want. They want someone to keep markets calm, and, you know, and then in times of crisis, they'll lurch the right. Sorry, I'm sorry to listeners. I'm dog sitting, and that will happen. Percy,
you did that real quick.
Obviously, disagreed with the point.
Right, my first call at work today. They'd been silent all day. First call, postman came. He went fucking mental. I just had to mute the client for 30 seconds and be like, "Sorry, dog barking." Anyway, universal credit.
The dog's called Percy.
Yeah, I know. It's a sausage dog as well. It's ridiculous. It's doing nothing for my street cred walking around with that. I look like Danny DeVito and his sausage dog.
So yeah, big shit going down in Peru. Happy
So
days.
is the next? Obviously, it's not settled yet, so we'll keep our eyes on what's going on there. But is the next big election in Latin America is that Brazil?
It's next year, isn't it? Brazil,
All I've seen is
2022.
polling, but it's the gap like ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, it's like 34-51, 34 being Bolsonaro, Lula on 51%.
The idea of being like wrongfully convicted, or what did you say he was convicted of?
It was
just corruption, basically.
Yeah,
the corruption was
that
linked to
then coming
very
back from that
specific
is going to
things.
give him like a big boost, isn't it?
Yeah,
I think, also the handling of coronavirus there has been absolutely ridiculous. So
Yeah.
like it's still
You
like
can
they've
pull-
basically got no regulations even still now, have they?
yes, but so you can pull those people in again. Hopefully, I mean, I'm happy to be wrong, but you
Yeah.
can pull people in from sort of the liberal side of things with the fact that even the Bolsonaro, whilst he is a right-wing fascist, is also shit at governing. Do you know, like some liberals
It's
would be
incompetent as
happy,
well.
would be happy again with someone that's the steady hand on the tiller and is keeping, in quotation marks, sort of like calm amongst this all. But he's not. He's
Yeah.
shit at it. And
That's
people
like
are dying
liberals
of
loving
it.
George Bush comes from that kind of
Well,
thing.
it's like liberals like standing, Kamala Harris, who the other day was in Guatemala saying, "Do not come, do not come, do not enter America, do not come." Now, if Trump had said that, it'd be
Yeah.
all over Twitter. Everyone
Yeah.
would be going mental. But the only issue is just that Trump has he'll probably say it in a bit more of a racist way. But either way, Kamala Harris is still saying exactly the same thing. She just knows how to present herself, basically. So it's just sort of like, yes, Queen, Stan,
Yeah.
and everyone loves her.
I realised why I thought it was it was called something to do with a petrol station. It's because he got caught. Lula got caught.
Petrobras or something.
No, he got caught up in something called Operation Car Wash, but that's just because it's it's oil companies money laundering their money.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I think was it done? Did they get done on they were just sort of giving shares out for cheap? I don't know.
I think it was in terms of the grand scale of corruption in Brazil, it was very, very minimal.
Yeah. And it was
But
you had all
definitely-
these sort of attorneys, I think, or district attorneys. I think they have them in Brazil, saying, "Oh, this is scandalous." And it's these very people are massively right wing and have been corrupt for years.
They're appointed corrupt judges. Of course they're going to point the finger at Social Democratic Party. But hopefully, as a result of coronavirus, as well, it will push Lula to more. I don't know what his program's been since he's come out of prison. I don't know if it's just been.
Well, I think his first speech was essentially about good governance and healthcare. So I think he's going to go down that route of. I've been there before, experience, and not as many. I wouldn't have allowed that many people of that many members of your family to die. Essentially,
which you'd think would be a good argument.
Well, yeah, you think it's an obvious one.
Doesn't seem to resonate.
But then
here.
the human race comes into factor, and they don't care.
Can you imagine? Slightly moving off topic, but can you imagine the boost that the Tories are going to get when we come out of this? Can you imagine what it's going to be like?
There'll be an election next year because you're going to have the vaccine bounce. Economic activity is going to be up because everything's back to normal.
Yeah, and they'll say we've got to have an election because we've just had this huge worldwide crisis.
I know you're a Welshman, Morgan, but I mean, imagine if England win the Euros.
That as well.
There might not be a Labour MP. Seriously.
That's so true.
The thing is
that combination.
That would be so fucking Boris, wouldn't it? For England to win the bloody Euros during his
jammy.
time.
That's so true, and he'll make a meal out of it.
On the flip side, as a shout out to our man Gareth, that his article in the Players Tribune about taking the knee, that at least this feels like a squad and a group of players that is very socially conscious, and a manager who.
I like him.
If we bomb out, Gareth Southgate needs a job within the FA because he's listened to the play. He's not just doing it. He's listened to. I mean, you've got players like Marcus Rashford. He's listened to the players. They want him to take the heat. They takes the heat for him, and he's taken on. To be honest, fucking England fans are all they could turn on him like that, and he's gonna basically. I don't care. This is more important.
But I would kind of like that because I would like there to be that sort of new new wave of like modern England fans to come in, because at the moment it's still very much, you know, they go over there, they get pissed, the chant, there's 10 German bombers in the air, and like, you know, they fucking beat the shit out of someone and trash up an outside bar or something. Like that is it. Like, and they're most of them.
I wouldn't travel away.
I wouldn't want to go. I would never want to go.
My mate went to when they played Holland in a friendly. Went to Amsterdam, and said it was absolutely terrible.
Yeah, when like I think you told me like chucking bikes in the canals.
Yeah, I mean that's not that bad, but they said he was in a hostel and they were just abusing a girl in there, like not like just like shouting abuse at her, and he was like,
yeah.
Do you want to leave her alone? Like, she's not English. Like, do you want to leave her alone by any chance? And they offered him out, and he was like, "Oh, I'm here to watch football. Let's not punch him in the face." No.
It's so rich when England played Bulgaria, and the Bulgarian fans were shouting chants at the black England players, which obviously is disgusting. Like that doesn't even need saying. But like the England fans were using it as like a tool to bash them with. I mean, it's like, do you know how you're seen by the world as well?
Yeah,
England fans.
exactly.
Like, I don't think you're like the most progressive set of football fans in the world. Like,
and that's the baffling thing, isn't it? Because a lot of England fans would defend the players against Bulgaria because that's what they perceive to be as racist, which it is racist.
Basically, just doing monkey chants is racism. Not
I would do that. I wouldn't do that.
Jarrad, booing the knee is anti-Marxism. It's not racist.
I'd only do it if we lose.
I said to someone the other day, you realise if you are anti an anti-racism gesture, two negatives make a positive. So you're pro the racism. That's how it works. You're anti something, you're pro it. That's just how it works.
Basic maths. Yeah. No, I do actually hope, don't tell my dad, but I do actually hope that England do well in this tournament. Although I will find it funny when they get knocked out by Portugal in the round of 16 still. But I do actually want them to do well, because you're right about they seem like a much better group of lads than the Rooneys and the John Terrys.
Do you genuinely think
that was a low bar? Someone that shagged the granny and someone that shagged his mate's wife. The Rooneys, the Terrys.
All of them. I don't like any of that older team.
For me, they're better.
Terry, who was also like chanted like racism as well.
They're better than the Adam Johnsons, the Lee Hugheses.
The Marlon Kings.
Yeah, they're better than them.
Do you genuinely think it is the reason that they boo is because they think it's Marxist? I mean,
oh god, no.
I don't want to give Marxism that much credence that people are even aware of it. I know it's been
who said it? Was that a news headline or something?
So
that's a thing that because Black Lives Matter is meant to be a Marxist organisation, isn't it?
Millwall booed it, and the Millwall fans in the league season, when they first had fans, they came out and said, "Oh, it's not against Black Lives Matter; it's against Marxism because it's a Marxist group." And now
they've been watching too much Peterson.
Yeah, and now similarly, England fans at the Riverside in the friendlies have said, "Oh, it's against Marxism." But the Ian Duncan Smiths, it's like a Twitter funny Twitter account, did a really funny video where it's like Millwall fans singing "Stick your collectivised farming up your arse."
I didn't see that one. That's class.
Did you see the one about like Marcus Rashford seizing the means of production in Burton on Trent?
Yeah, that was so good. I love when he shared that. So good. Oh, that is funny. It just shows you people don't understand that phrase at all, do they?
No, they just put themselves like everything's Marxism, isn't it? Like the issue is for some of the things that they call out, it is like insufferable liberalism, but it's become Marxism, which is like the most frustrating thing in the world. It's like, you know what, I do probably agree with you on some things, but that's not fucking Marxism.
For a very different reason.
Them taking the Fawlty Towers Hitler episode off, that's just Marxism now, where it's actually just some sort of fucking liberal exec panicked and we're like, oh shit. On that, by the way, I mean this might be a fucking lovely little segue on people that want to show that they've got a nice liberal face but actual pricks. Brewdog.
Oh,
what a
joy
bunch of wankers.
I loved reading that statement today. I hate Brewdog. I hate everything about them.
For people that haven't seen it, if you go to Punks with Purpose, so it's at Punks W Purpose on Twitter. So Brewdog are they're a brewery. I like some of their beers, I'm not gonna lie. But
a pair of hipster twats.
Yeah, they're basically a pair of hipster people. And I was explaining to Morgan before we started recording that they're almost like that sort of venture capitalist liberal, where they're like, yeah, we're cool, we're down, we're hip, but ultimately, we will screw over workers and whatever. And a load of former employees have come forward and written an open letter saying that we were treated like shit, your company is shit, your company's morals are completely fucked, like talking about the fact that they've got this zero carbon beer, but they've actually got private jets with the company,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. And they basically exposed. I mean, me and Jarrad and our friend Pete have been like slagging them off for years. Like stuff like Audi did something that sort of sounded like punk IPA, and they sued them. There was some small brewery in Wales that was called Punk something that's been going for longer than Brewdog, and they tried to sue them because they were called Punk Brewery or whatever. Like they're just the fucking worst of the worst. And now to see them get exposed like this it tastes fucking sweet.
Yeah, and I think as well, it was like, from what I read, it was the main crux of the issue that like workers had. These are previous workers and present workers. Was, there was a culture of fear at the place. It was like, I think it was like growth at all costs. Like it was just like a constant working. We need to grow.
In their apology letter, they were literally like, "Yeah, whoa, we hear you. Sorry, guys, but we have been focused on growth." And
and it was just like,
problem.
What made me laugh was, it was like, we hear you. If you feel this way, and you work for us, come and speak to us. If you don't feel that way, though, and you disagree, can you sign this letter where we just disregard everything that we just said? I
hate that bit as well. They started, literally, their response letter, it got leaked that was going to get sent out to employees and then sent out. And it's like, dear, was it Punks with Purpose?
Punks with Purpose, yeah.
Literally, first line, wow, full stop. Imagine, I can see him now in his fucking like glass cube office going, dictate this. Wow, full stop, new paragraph. We hear you, full stop. And it's like, he's like, the one bit is like, it was like, and what we realise is right now is that we now realise why we hired you people that left due to poor conditions in the first place, because you're punk. And it's like, you fucking bunch of like, fucking unbearable.
Yeah, I mean, we're on it now, and like, but there were some like serious concerns raised about, like, there's a culture of, like, misogyny and sexism at the company, and and their quest for growth was like causing people to suffer from mental illness as a result of their work, like serious, like
and
very
like
bad work in terms of conditions.
And the whole thing is based around a cult personality around the two people that created it, who like fucking talk through LinkedIn all day, being like, "This is what we're doing." Like they lied about, like, I think the Maryland estate, who like ran by Priscilla Presley, apparently wrote them a letter to be like, stop using the word Elvis juice. So one of them legally changed their name to Elvis, which wasn't true, but it was all just a marketing campaign. So it's probably the defamation letter probably wasn't even true in the first place, but they get to seem like they're these cool, like, fucking, like, taking on they're just another bunch of pricks.
Yeah, they're just sort of like, was it? There's no such thing as bad publicity or something. What's the phrase? Like, all news is good news or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah,
but I think that's like that's their like business motto, isn't it? Like,
definitely. And the thing about growth, like the constant hunt for growth or whatever. I'd heard someone like talking about what was happening with Brewdog using that phrase, but I didn't know that had come from them. Like, they're basically admitting that they have these workplace practices because they are trying to make as much money as possible. Essentially, is another way of saying that.
Growth stuff is just so fun. It's just amazing. It's just.
Do you think everyone would be like, "Oh, okay"? All the workers would be like, "Oh, no, fair play. I didn't realise."
Sorry, I didn't realise we were making you money. I didn't realise that.
Yeah. Thanks for reminding me.
It's just that idea that, and people get sucked into it. Like, they obviously did the Barnard's Castle IPA after the Dominic Cummings stuff, because they know that their market of people will enjoy that sort of shit. But they're just the most unbearable type. It's like they're like the Mark Zuckerberg type. I bet they got fucking bean bags, and no one sits on no one's allowed an orthopedic chair. They've all got to sit on fucking bean bags, like.
Yeah,
100%. And you know who loves them? Who went there in his campaign for the Labour leadership? Mr. Keir Starmer. Keith absolutely loves Brewdog, and he fits in perfectly with that lifestyle, that kind of, the thing you're describing, like sitting around on bean bags, like being all chill.
It's like the bloke from the thick of it.
About your growth.
What's his name? The fucking the like technocrat, the bald guy, the spin doctor.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Guys, let's give it 5. Let's have a chill out session, and we'll chat about this new line of IPAs. Yeah. Sorry, the factory workers want what? A pay rise? Fucking get some agency workers in. Fuck them.
Yeah, and it's just I don't like these people who like they suck in. It's like sort of like the FBPE crowd, just like follow back pro Europe crowd on Twitter, like the
Barnard's
massive,
Castle
like,
IPA. Haha, lol.
yeah, and it's like, oh, just settling in for the night, and it's like with a can of that. Like, you're obviously meant to be like the intelligent people, right? Because all they ever say is like, oh, Leavers are idiots, Remainers are really clever. Yet you're being duped by this brand just to buy some fucking craft beer, which is the same craft beer they use. They probably charge you for an extra £2 a can anyway, because it's a special one. But they haven't made that any special for that can. It's just a fucking name, and you've been duped. Fucking idiots. It winds me up.
I know what you mean. Yeah, like Leave voters are the idiots, but you're
Just
the one.
hate them.
You're the one buying the fucking Barnard's Castle IPA because just to show on Twitter that you're.
I think it's so obvious. Like, it's about the money. Like, they don't actually care, and you're like falling into it. Like, depressing.
But it's good to see. It's good to see them that ass getting handed to them. I saw it.
Yeah, but I wouldn't be surprised if, like Morgan said, if it was a. Oh, did you say it? Or if it's all planned? Like, it's all premeditated. I don't think it is, but it wouldn't surprise me if this was some sort of
Unite
Hospitality would do.
Unite Hospitality have started tweeting about it, and the CEO,
that's good.
the CEO of Brewdog replied to them.
Right.
So he sent Unite Hospitality sent out the retweeted them being like, this is the email. Basically, Brewdog sent out an email being like, could all workers sign this to say that we're sound? And then obviously that got screenshotted. Unite Hospitality put that out, and he replied being like, it's not true, it didn't come from me. And they replied with someone else being like, isn't it? And it clearly was from him. Like, he clearly sent it out. So yeah, hopefully it's built on solid ground. Showing these companies what they are.
It's not just Brewdog, but there's been like, I'm into my craft beer, and there's been like a big like Me Too movement in the craft beer scene, because it's predominantly ran by men, and there's a lot of like, malpractice when it comes to like the treatment of women in businesses, and Brewdog has come out as like the worst offender, basically. So it obviously to do with workers' rights and stuff, but it's all of it. Like, it's a real shit show of a company by the sounds of it.
Macho venture capitalist cunts.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not the name for a good album, by the way. I don't know. I mean, that's a punk album ready to.
That's what are they called? Sleaford Mods album, that is.
Yeah,
right exactly. There. Love it. Is there anything else that we wanted to talk about? What's been happening recently?
I mean, the only thing we had that we could briefly mention, because we'd have to do a whole episode on it, is the Unite elections, which are quite important for I mean, at the time of speaking,
it's got to be a State of the Union episode, though, surely.
I don't think we've got enough to talk. I mean, at the minute, because it will move on quite quickly. Basically, what's happened is all four candidates have got the nominations from branches required to be on the ballot. 3 of them are left wing, 1 of them isn't. Jarrad was on the ballot last time and then got kicked out of Unite temporarily because he misused data, but he is of the Labour right, basically. And
what's his name?
Is it Gerald or Jarrad Coyne?
Jarrad Coyne. He used to be the West Midlands region officer.
Isn't he behind though?
But he's behind in nomination.
He's on the ballot though. That's all that matters.
But if you've got 3 left versus 1 on the right, it's
okay. I thought he was behind in like membership polls or something. But yeah.
Well, it probably is, but it depends on if there's only 1 candidate. If it's against 3 candidates splitting the left vote, similar to what happened in Unison. If there was an agreement at Unison, the right-wing candidate wouldn't have won. But it looks like we're headed down that way now. Because I can't imagine that Howard Beckett's going to step down because he's got a massive ego.
It's such an important election for the left. Like, it's just fucking massive, biggest union in Britain, the most active. Militant, most politically active unian, and at
a time where the relationship with the Labour Party is pretty, rocky, and it's going to be important.
My branch, just because sheer numbers, nominated Howard Beckett because that was just to stop Coyne from getting the nomination because trying to keep him off the ballot. But yeah, he has got a bit of a personality thing going on. I mean, essentially, for the
who's your man then?
I mean,
it's a woman, Morgan.
Is it?
It's
a woman.
It's Steve.
I was actually going to say all woman, but then I thought that was like...
Steve Turner, Sharon Graham, and Howard Beckett are the 3 left people, and it's in that order for nomination as well.
So Howard Beckett's got this massive social media campaign, but that is all he's got, and you're getting all these people, and it's really fucking doing my head in. commenting on Facebook and Twitter. I'm like, I bet you're not even a member of Unite, but you're just some sort of, I'm going to say, some weirdo crank who spends all day on Twitter, who like, is obsessed with Howard Beckett.
Northern Independence Party type people.
Yeah, and it's like, well, you don't even have a say. You're not in the union. You're just on social media as a lefty, giving it the big one for Howard Beckett. You can't even vote, and you're telling other people, oh, it's got the Howard already. But you can't vote. It's not your union anyway. So shut the fuck up.
Where are you at? Where are you at with it, Jarrad? In terms of the three of them, as Steve Turner said.
Well, Sharon Graham has said from the office she's not going to step down, even if it's. I'm pretty sure she's already said quite early on.
That's it then, though, isn't it? Look,
yeah,
they'll all stay because if Steve Turner won't step down because he's in the lead.
Well, he's in the lead. Yeah.
So the left are going to fuck it again.
Well, unless Howard Beckett stands down, I suppose, because the argument for having Sharon Graham on there is she sucks up some of Gerard Coyne's votes. That is why a lot of people are saying, because she's on the left and she's an unbelievable organiser, which is what Unite have moved away from for so long, which is like getting into the nitty-gritty of organising and providing resources to reps and members. She does suck at some of Gerard Coyne's votes. Beckett and Steve Turner probably could do as well because he's seen as a bit of a pragmatist. Howard Beckett would probably be the most sort of it would probably be, if it was Howard Beckett versus Gerard Coyne, that would be sort of left versus right, and I think it probably would be on the wire because I think it was like there was only like 12,000 or it might have been less than that votes in it between Len McCluskey and Gerard Coyne when it was 1v1. And Len McCluskey was obviously then, the sort of the left socialist.
Who's McCluskey backing?
He's not backing anyone because they're all assistant general secretaries.
Oh, right.
He was like the head of the United Left, and the United Left group have supported Steve Turner. It's a shit show. I'm at that point now where I just think, well, one of them, as long as it's
not Coyne.
Well, it's got to be Howard Beckett because he's got the least amount, basically.
Yeah, I think Howard Beckett probably should step away, but I don't think he will.
And I think he's got too much political baggage. Like, he just doesn't know how to shut his fucking mouth.
Did you see the thing the other day? Did you see the other thing the other day, Morgan, where he said Priti Patel should get deported?
What?
Yeah,
really badly worded. He was like,
yeah, and it's just like, what are you doing? Like,
I mean, that's the kind of thing that pisses off like liberals more than it would piss off me. But it's just why you say that?
Yeah, exactly. I'm not an optics left person, but sometimes,
it's just inappropriate. It's like not because it's inappropriate towards Priti Patel because I couldn't give a shit about her, but it is inappropriate and offensive towards people who are deported based on their
also, why don't we have a society where deportations aren't a thing?
Yeah, because why do we have to use that language?
Place doesn't matter. It just matters where you are at that current point.
So he's a bit of a loose mouth.
And his main idea is to fucking pump millions of pounds into a Unite TV, which I don't mind. Which might be a good idea.
This would be me.
Like, just give branches money.
This is what I would end up doing if I was in any way involved in politics or running for anything. I would end up saying stupid shit like that, and just I'd have some decent ideas, but I'd just end up saying the most ridiculous nonsense because I was being questioned or something.
Howard Beckett has now turned his replies off on Twitter.
Yeah, I'd do that, and then I'd have a meltdown. I'm like, oh, fuck off, man.
He's a multi-millionaire going around claiming to be a socialist.
Is he?
And everyone is being taken for a ride. I'm not denying he's probably a good trade unionist. The bloke is a multi-millionaire.
How do you know that?
He sold his law firm to Unite. That's what they use. It used to be called like something like HHB, BB and Beckett in the Northwest. They sold it to Unite. They made it their legal law firm for millions of pounds. He's fucking wadded.
You gotta be a little bit wary of that, then, I suppose.
This is what I mean. I'm at that point now where I just think it's between the three of us.
It's not my problem.
Yeah, one of them's got to step down, and if they don't, we lose. It's on them. And can they take that personal responsibility? And personally, for myself, I think it's got to be at least Howard Beckett's drops out at least.
Yeah, because he come last. I mean, if it come down to it, and it was between Sharon and Steve. I don't think Sharon will step down because I'm pretty sure she said from the offset she's not she's trying to paint herself as like, well, I'm not part of this faction, I'm not part of this clique, I'm not part of this group. I am the organising candidate. But she has come out and said, like, I will reduce Labour funding and I will target Labour funding to individual Unite Labour MPs or councillors. But she's a fantastic organiser. She's a really good campaigner.
So
and
maybe it'll come down.
Her whole thing is like crisis leverage. So like her whole thing is leveraging. So rather than like attacking the company at a source, say if like, for example, was it Go Bus in Manchester who are firing and rehiring? She just stopped talking to Go Bus, but instead went straight to the Swedish bank that were bankrolling Go Bus and said, do you realise this is what you're funding? And then straight away after she went, they caved in and gave them all the terms and conditions back.
Get them when they're vulnerable, kind of thing.
Yeah, so it's a different tactic, it's a different approach, but she does all the big shit with BA, British Airways. You know, she handles all the big negotiations, and it'd be nice to have a woman in charge as well, rather than having all these sort of like burly white men around, like, I'm a socialist, I'm a big old trade unionist, like. Yeah, I really like her. She's really, really good, and I hope if anyone listens to it, they vote for her.
Maybe it will come down to that if none of them are going to step down.
But you know, if you was to look at
the membership, like just deciding who they're going to go with,
and you have to remember that. Okay, there's a vote. People who support trade unions on Twitter are on the left, but the actual Unite membership is not. The vast majority of them voted Conservative in the last election. They're not left-wing socialists. Well, it's a failure. It's a failure of Unite education. It's a failure of Unite from top to bottom, basically.
That's why that TV thing might be a good idea. We're talking about.
Oh yeah,
or whatever it was that you were.
Yeah, but who knows what's going to happen? But ultimately, I think if it comes down to it, Steve Turner's got to be the one to face Jarrad Coyne if it comes to it, because he got the most nominations. I mean, there's not much more he can do. He won fair and square. Howard Becky got the least, and he's just got to have to deal with that. Like he initially he was disputing the balloting system within the United Left on who they would nominate. So I think there was only like one vote in it, and it ended up going to Steve Turner. He disputed it. The United Left committee just said, no, that's it now, it's done. We've had the vote. There was no discrepancies. You lost. And he was like, well, I don't believe that's true. And then he stood as a candidate, and he's come last in regard to the left candidates, and he just needs to fuck off now, basically. I don't like the man at all. I'm very suspect of anyone who's a multi-millionaire anyway, and I just think he's a fucking knob.
I understand that, and someone who's a loudmouth as well.
And I just think he's a fucking knob. I'm a fan of that.
Yeah, he moves off too much on Twitter, and you know, I don't want my general secretary fucking spending all day on Twitter. Do you know what I mean? Do some fucking work.
Well, it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting if you guys can do like a State of the Union in when is the election?
It's a while, isn't it?
Yeah, so in like a few weeks or months or whatever, if you guys did one and see where things have changed by then, if anyone is looking like pulling out or anything like that, you can do an update.
We'll try and do one. I mean, it'd be nice. I think it'd be better to see when people have dropped out, because then you've got less like allegiance type people being like, we should back. Well, I mean, like Jarrad's just done there, but you know, that's fine.
Well, I look forward to listening to that State of the Union podcast. Should we wrap it up there? I think that's a good chunk of stuff talked about.
I have my chippy tea has just arrived, so that's why.
We better get off then.
Yeah,
lovely.
But I devour it.
So what we haven't actually got anything in particular lined up at the minute, but we've got a lot of kind of sort of arranged stuff, haven't we, over the next few weeks, where basically we'll have some content for you. We'll definitely do a podcast, every week for the next few weeks. So look out for it. Hope you enjoyed this one, just a casual one. And we'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.
See ya.